Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Marketer of the Day podcast. We are here with Peter Montoya. His website is petermontoya.com. Peter is a thought leader, a skilled orator, and a leadership strategist with real-life experience driving his insights and ideas. Today we'll talk about innovative leadership, high-performance systems, how to go from bankruptcy to multi-million-dollar exits, so many fun adventures. Peter, glad to be talking to you.
I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you for having me.
Glad to have you. Thrilled to have you. So as far as you and your focus and your passion, what have you been working on the last 6 or 12 months?
So, I had a software company, which I sold in 2018. And when I got done with that, I had the privilege of being able to do whatever I really want to do. And what I really enjoy doing is working with business leaders to both improve their business skills, but more importantly, to transform their organizations and make them really high performance. So they can actually achieve the results they want, the growth they want, drop more to the bottom line, and more importantly, have more passion and fun in working in the business.
And what does that look like? Because when you explain some of these things to me, it sounds like it's going from a place where you dread to work, where it's a slog, where it's a mess, where there's lots of roller coasters and panics, into a really well-oiled machine. But I'm not sure exactly what the end result, what the goal is supposed to look like. So what is that kind of environment like?
So let me share with you a kind of my story. So when I started my first advertising agency back in 1997, gosh, it was 23 years ago, I had ADHD, which meant that a lot of people think that ADHD means you either have no focus, but actually it means you either have no focus or you have all focus, you have hyper focus. And once I started working, I was able to work 12 to 14 hours a day. I could put my head down and just crank out a bunch of work, and it felt really good. I was uber productive. And I started having a lot of success. I was doing sales and marketing and content development. I was speaking, I was training, I was bringing new business. So I started hiring new people, and I spent about 1% of my time with my people and 99% of my time in my own personal production. My strategy was to hire good people, point at the top of the hill, tell them to charge the hill, and then I'd walk away, go back and doing work. And my organizations were always largely dysfunctional, and they never really exceeded my own personal production. I kind of hit a cap. That makes sense?
It does. It seems like you were maybe trying to do a lot of it yourself and headed towards burnout, and then maybe not the best lines of communication, so that way just no one know, the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing, it seems like.
That's exactly it. And that was the first, 15 years of my business career. And I would hit these kind of plateaus in my revenue. And maybe about 10 years ago, I kind of had a giant aha, a real huge epiphany. And when I completely changed my leadership style. My leadership style had been what we'll call authoritative. I thought my job as a leader was to do vision, strategy, also do all of the thinking for the organization, and basically to dictate and tell people what to do. And more or less, I had a bunch of people who did what they were told. I kind of ruled by intimidation and also by carrot and stick. I either scared them or paid them well, but it really wasn't that an empowering environment. And then 8 years ago, I had a huge light bulb moment, and I realized the number one goal of a business leader is not vision, strategy, thinking, and dictating. The number one goal of a business leader is leadership development. So all of a sudden, I completely refocused my time, and I spent 60% of my time working with my team, empowering them and developing them as leaders, and only 40% of my time on doing the things that I had to do to drive the business forward.
And I'm hearing from you a lot of percentages. Like in your head, there's the pie chart of like your time is focused on these activities and then more on those activities. So when you went from the 1%, 99% into now 60% of leadership development, what does that look like day to day when you meet with them and you get these other people to do the work and the thinking and more taking the reins? I mean, where do you even begin with that, and what kind of meetings do you have for this?
So let me kind of give you the formula, first of all, and then I'll tell you the activity. So the formula is the empowerment formula. When you actually want to turn your people into leaders, here are the three things you got to do. Number one, you got to instill them within a sense of mission. They have to know what the mission of the organization is, the mission of their team, and most importantly, their mission is. And they got to have absolute crystal clarity on exactly where they're headed. That's part one. Then two is instill a sense of absolute responsibility, which means they have a clear sense of ownership of owning their own results, and also give them maximum levels of authority to produce the results. So no longer are you kind of delegating just a task for them to do or an activity or a process. Now you're saying, here's the results you own, and you give them maximum levels of authority as much as possible. And that means, maximum decision making. And the third thing you do is you teach them competence. Make sure they have the competence to their jobs, but also more importantly, decision-making competence, which means you're bringing them into your decision-making process. And once you do that, you actually are turning them into leaders where they can own their outcome. You bring all of a sudden unleash their creativity, their passion, their work ethic, because they really are enthralled to create more. And once I did that, we started growing by 25, 50%, and sometimes 100% per year, because no longer was it just one person working on growing the business. I had 25 people working on growing the business.
And in order to change your thinking that way, was it difficult to go from just kind of you making decisions plus you had these minions into now you had 25 other decision makers? Because what comes to mind as you're explaining like the before picture is people always talk about, like, Steve Jobs was a real a jerk, right? And everyone was afraid to talk to him, and it was kind of like hit or miss. And then it's like sometimes I'll chat with people on this podcast who have like a bunch of employees, and they say, just go and create me some fun stuff. And I've tried to tap into that with like I took way too long to start hiring, and then now I say, here's some new software, just make some things, and let's tell me what you come back with, and go back and forth. So that way, there's some of these things that you're talking about. There's the responsibility, the ownership, but it's taken a lot of just almost like rewiring my whole brain to let go of the control freak. And also, it's been surprising seeing what they come back with is sometimes better than I could have made or better than I could have instructed. So how the heck do we think the way that we're supposed to be thinking here?
That is a great question. So I kind of, as I shared my story, it sounded like a magic wand. Well, it took, 2 or 3 years for me to rewire my brain, because I really was very, very authoritative. And also I love solving problems. So I loved it when someone would come to me, come with a problem, and I would solve the problem for them. It took a while for me to get out of that and get better at mentoring and coaching, which means you're asking a lot more questions and maybe only giving a little bit of advice around the edges. And what happened over time was I got really good at doing exactly what you did, which is, make sure they know what the mission is, make sure they know where they're headed, let them solve it and come back to me. And oftentimes they would have solutions better than I did, just what you experienced. And sometimes I would let them fail and let them actually learn from the experience of failing, so they can go back and do it again better. And it took 2-3 years for me to get really, really good at that. You're right. It's not magic.
But that's a good way of putting it there, that you're mentoring and coaching. And I hadn't thought of it that way, because it's easy to think that, you have this team, you have these employees, you pay them money, you assign them tasks. It's easy to think that they're just living, breathing machines. And when you're thinking in terms of like they're a coaching client almost, right? You give them advice, you push them in the right direction, you let them fail, make mistakes. That makes a lot of sense, and it's a lot less hands off. And we're talking today a lot about leadership, being a leader, but I know that for some people that's kind of a scary term. But I think for a lot of us, especially if we're running our own business, at some point we have to take off the training wheels and step it up and get that confidence. So if someone out there says, well, being a leader, I don't know about that, how would you encourage people listening to kind of step up to the plate?
So let me share with you the 3 domains of leadership. So the first domain of leadership is what we commonly think of. We think about some leaders standing on a podium, orating to hundreds or thousands of people. They're impassioning them, they're inspiring them, and those people are going to go out and conquer the world, something like that. And that's kind of our perception of a leader, which is a leader of an organization or a business or a government or something like that. Second domain of leadership is friends and family. So whether you know it or not, you are a leader among your friends and family. You are either leading them by an example of what to do or what not to do. And the third and most important area of leadership is self-leadership. So the truth is, whether a person realizes it or not, they are already a leader. So I'm just getting them to try to recognize that they are leading. Now, next, once you, even if you have just one person, you are a leader of either yourself and or one more person. And you've got to realize the most important job of a leader today, the most important job of a leader is leadership development. So unfortunately, you really have got two choices here. You can kind of be a manager, which means you're managing a business, and most likely you were like I was early in the business, where you're spending 99% of your time in personal production. You're babysitting, you're a beggar, you're pleading with people all the time to get work done, or you can transform yourself and start seeing yourself as a leader. And when you're a leader of leaders. So it's a transformation in mindset, most likely already owning what you should be owning, which is everyone's a leader today.
Okay, so there are multiple facets to work on, and we need to work on not just making ourselves leader, but getting these other people to be leaders. And it seems like a common thread we've been touching on is on not just hiding in your hole, not just closing the door to your office and grinding it
Mm-hmm.
and involving other people. And I see that in your bio and your information, you talk about loneliness being the new cancer, that we just can't stay in our box. So can you unpack that a little bit? Can you tell us how loneliness is the new cancer? Because that sounds really scary and depressing.
It is. There was a study published about 2 years ago that basically proved that being lonely, that pain of being lonely, is actually worse for your personal health and worse for your longevity than smoking 15 cigarettes per day. So, with all our evolution of technology, we as human beings become increasingly more isolated. I mean, which is great for productivity. We can get more done by purely staring at a computer screen, but it's absolutely horrible for our well being. So, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions here and fire off your best guesses. All right. So, here are the questions. Question number one: how many hours does the average human being need of good social contact every day in order to maximize their sense of well being? Where they feel authentic, have high esteem and self confidence. How many hours a day would you guess?
I would guess 3 to 6.
Yes, 3 to 4 hours is what the research says. All right, next question. How many hours is the average American getting per day of good social contact? And this is pre COVID, so before we were on lockdown. The data is about 2 years old. How much time is the average human being actually getting in America?
Guess is zero point 0.5.
You're almost right. It was 41 minutes. A good guess. All right. Now, how many hours a day is the average American spending on screens at work and at home? Computer screens, TV screens, tablets, and phones. How many hours a day is the average human being in America spending on screens?
My guess is 12 to 14.
Man, you are right on the money today. It's 11 hours and 41 minutes or 46 minutes, something like that. Yeah. So we need between 3 to 4 hours of good, empathetic connection with other human beings to maximize our, sense of authenticity and confidence and esteem. We're only getting about 41 minutes. That was pre-COVID, and we're wasting so much time in front of our screens. So our screens, when they're at their very, very best, helps us connect to real human beings in the places in the world, and our screens are at their worst when they keep us from connecting authentically with the person sitting next to us. And leadership today is all about people. People are the alpha to omega of all leadership, and those personal relationships that you have with people are absolutely what make or break your ability to get things done in an organization today.
I think we can all relate to a lot of that, of being like it when we stare too much at our screens, we get kind of like screen brain, right? And
Mm-hmm.
there have been times when I've told myself I need to just spend a day or two not looking at my phone, and sometimes I'll turn the color of my phone off so that way it's just black and white. And but I mean, it's a little alarming when you explain it the way that you do that. Well, there's the TV screen, there's phone screen, there's tablet, there's TV. I mean, when are we not staring at our screens? And do you have any advice for dialing down the screen time and dialing up the personal time, or is it just a matter of being aware or scheduling that time? Like, how do we make sure that we stay on track here?
Great question. So I used to think up until about 5 years ago that there were three legs to my stool of well-being. Here were the three legs I thought were on the stool, which is my diet, eating, your exercise, which is means usually at least 3 times a week, at least 20 minutes, if not 30 minutes or 40 minutes of vigorous exercise, and sleep. And I thought if I took care of those three things, I'd be really happy and healthy. It turns out I was wrong. For the vast part of my business career, I was working 40 to 70 hours a week, and my social activity was a bonus if it ever happened. There were years when I didn't have see anybody else besides people I saw at work. And what I realized is the fourth leg of your physical health is social connectivity. So I still, even now during COVID, I'm scheduling between 2 and 3 meetings a week with my friends via FaceTime or Zoom so I can actually see them. We really want to start cranking up the number of appointments, which we have. We have lunches and meetings and other things we're doing with other friends on a regular basis as part of our well-being and maintenance package. When I was working really hard, I only saw other people when that actually helped me move my business forward, and that really wasn't too healthy.
Right, and I think that I was even thinking about that the other day. That there are some people that I know business wise that we're just friends, and there are other people that only talk to me or only meet with me when they need something from me. And at first I didn't catch on, but over the years, when it's only when they wanted to work on something that was when they met, I feel a little bit used to it. But it's good to
Mm-hmm.
have those friends that you just kind of chit chat sometimes, and there's not really a much of a goal other than to stay connected. And do you have any advice for those of us that maybe number one get tired out from too much social interaction, right? If we're introverted instead of extroverted and just get worn down from all the people instead of getting the energy. And number two, do you have any advice from, I don't even know how to explain it, but like, sometimes you have some of these social conversations, you always replay it and you let the perfectionism get back in, and you're like,
Mm-hmm.
well, could that have gone better, and you just can't shake it. Do you have any advice for just kind of the awkwardness, the bad side of that social interaction?
So a couple of things. So first of all, I actually am what they call an ambivert. An ambivert is kind of in the middle of the continuum between extrovert and introverted. So sometimes I like groups, and more often I actually like being with individuals. Introverts, by and large, the definition is you get your recharge from being alone, and extroverts get recharged with being a group of people. So even introverts, they still need people. It's just oftentimes the large groups is what really wears them out. So for me, I find my best connectivity with a group of 1 to maybe 4 people tops, and that's what works best for me, where I feel invigorated and enlivened. And the larger groups can be a little taxing for me, but I use those sometimes sparingly. So for you, you've got to know which format works best for you, and most likely your social connectivity, no matter how strained it must be or tiring it must be, will add years to your life. So I know a lot of people who have said, people wear me out, they tire me out, and they kind of like buy a dog or buy a cat. Animals are wonderful, but unfortunately, without social connectivity, you're most likely shaving years, quality years of off your life. There's a great book called The Blue Zone, and in that book, they basically studied the longevity, and everyone who lives to their 80s, 90s, or hundreds has a very tight knit group of people they see on a regular basis. So our social connectivity is really important to our well being.
Interesting. You almost make it sound like exercise, where it's some work. Some days you might not feel like doing it, but it's a good habit to have, and then it adds to your life, and it's healthy for you. So why not do it, even if you might pass on it? Do it anyway.
Yeah, that's exactly how I think of it. It's the 4 legs of the stool: diet, exercise, sleep, and social connectedness. It's really important to your well being. And I know for me, that if I don't see people on a regular basis and not having that connected feeling, I kind of feel like my confidence goes down, my esteem goes down. And then in leadership positions, when I'm in those times of stress, I have higher anxiety. I'm less calm under pressure. I'm not able to build rapport as much. So, I can kind of feel myself when I'm around the right amount of people, the right amount of time, that my leadership is better too.
Keeping the muscle strong, and
It
and
is.
so and in your bio, I see that you have some big ideas, right? You talk about being moral, about the environment, about
Mhm.
having a responsibility to humanity. And in the last few minutes here, can you tell us all about that? About what's the deal with some of this big picture, future stuff that's on your mind?
Yeah. So, let me ask you this question. Uh, Based on our current trajectory, do you think human civilization, will be better or worse off than it is right now?
I think that there are some things to figure out, but I think it will be better. Just
Okay.
it won't be
I,
easy.
I think based on current trajectory, where we're currently headed, it's going to be worse off. That's my current assessment, and that scares the bejesus out of me. So I come from a place of personal responsibility, and the whole thought of me turning over the planet to my kids when I pass away in 30 or 40 years, I hope, is absolutely horrifying to me. That's not the way that a human being should live their life. So I really, and a lot of people, whether you do share my pessimism or your optimism, I think we all have to be working together to make sure that we're not only living lives of well-being, but we're also living responsibly. And so that's why I'm so impassioned about leaders to help convert business leaders into leaders, and also more importantly to train the next generation of leaders, so we have something really special to turn over our kids and grandkids.
So set a good example, and then and what does that look like as far as the changed behavior? Does that mean adopt a cause and make it not just about money? Like, what should we
Mm-hmm.
all maybe have in the back of our minds as far as changing this trajectory?
Good question. So, one of the things I talk about is one factor, single factor, and five factor leadership. And single factor leaders are only really interested in whatever the outcome is best for them. They're looking to make more money or whatever it might be. And they're really going to get very, very limited performance out of their team. Most people today, especially millennials, want to be doing something good for the world. We're actually hardwired to want to help out other people. And so when you have a business that's not only making the shareholder money, which might be you, but also taking care of your employees, taking care of your suppliers, taking care of your clients, and taking care of the environment, you're actually going to get much better performance out of your people, and you'll actually grow faster. So doing good today is really good business.
Nice, and you have to wonder if it's maybe a counteraction to some of the bad things you see with like Enron or BP
Mm-hmm.
or some of the COVID bailouts, and then they use them for stock buyback. Sometimes you see this
Mm-hmm.
scummy behavior, and I wonder if it inspires people to go in the opposite direction to cancel some of that out.
I think so. I was born in '68. I'm 51. And so I was raised in the go-go '80s and '90s, and they were really all about greed. I was raised on a movie, Wall Street, which was, greed is good. That was Gordon Gekko's line. And that was kind of, permeated our culture. For me, even growing up, I really believed that making money was the end all be all. And I made money and realized that success really is not happiness. Happiness is living a life of purpose, having wonderful relationships around you. And for me, it's transforming leaders. I really get excited seeing people transform.
Well, I agree completely. You think about old timey 80s TV shows like Lifestyle of the Rich and Famous or
Mm-hmm.
MTV Cribs. That's really a dated concept now, right? You look at that and it's almost a little bit disgusting. You want maybe something more well rounded. And speaking of that, speaking of developing good leaders, and speaking of what you can do for people out there, where can people find you? And what sorts of training, courses, coaching, or whatever do you have to talk about today?
Thank you for asking that question. Yeah, I do a high performance mentoring group called the High Performance Organization, where I work with business leaders to train their organizations from being something that they dread, that's probably not making them out the money they want to, or making the impact they want to having a fine oiled machine. So they have people who are all pulling in the same direction. They have a sense of mission and person and mission and purpose, and then also more importantly, the business owners can untether themselves to the business so it's not so reliant upon them. And they can find that at the highperformanceorganization.co or petermontoya.com. Go there, press the High Performance Organization, and you can schedule a phone call with me. We can see if it's a good fit for you to be part of that mentoring program.
Fantastic. Well, if you're out there listening or watching this podcast and you jotted down a bunch of notes like I did, and you say, you know what, I don't want to just leave things on a cliffhanger, I want to keep the conversation going, then the place to go is thehighperformanceorganization.co and petermontoya.com. And all those things that you mentioned there, Peter, sound great. Everyone pulling in the same direction, not playing office politics, not having all these clashing of egos, and also getting untethered from the business, so that way we can create something that runs on its own, and that way we can jump in when we feel like it, or build cool things and let them run on autopilot. All that sounds great. It sounds better than that before picture you painted earlier of being overworked, tired, being the boss from hell. Who wants that? Your way sounds a lot better.
It took me only 23 years to figure it out, and now I just want to give everyone the formula so they can do it for themselves.
So they don't have to suffer for 23 years. They can listen to you, and find the shortcut. And the place to go is petermontoya.com and thehighperformanceorganization.co. Thanks so much, Peter, for being open and for sharing so many cool things. And you've given me a lot to think about. I'm sure you've given listeners a lot to think about as well. So thank you.
I loved our time together. Thank you so much for having me, Robert.